We have been talking about the economy an awful lot after the really disappointing numbers we got for first quarter growth. We always ask you what you're seeing, and does this feel like a 0.7% growth economy to you?
No. I'm a broken record on this subject, but since the fall of 2009, literally, it's been about 2% a year, and I don't think the figures are necessarily that accurate when you get to tenths and all of that. I'm sure it's sped up a little bit sometimes and fallen back just a little. It's been 2% a year now for 7.5 years, and I don't think we've really seen anything like that. I mean, it was a great recession, but the recovery has been very steady. Autos are falling off a little now, but housing is good, and most of our businesses are doing a little bit better. But I don't see it being a lot more than that. I don't see it being a lot less. I wouldn't be surprised if when it's revised, it comes in a little higher than that. And it's not perfect reporting. Now, what I see isn't perfect either, obviously, but I just don't see anything but kind of a steady rise.
We have seen that month by month, maybe things come in a little different. How did January, February, March, and April, did you see any rises or falls in those months?
Well, we did see the same thing other people saw in a few areas, namely that the federal refund checks went out later. We really see that at Geico. I mean, you can almost hear the checks hitting the mailbox or whatever it is. And I think every business almost that I've looked at, March was better than January and February compared to a year ago. Now, there was an extra day in February last year, and who knows when Easter falls. So there's be a lot of things I don't, fully factor in. But it looked to me like March was getting better.
We have a jobs report coming out tomorrow morning. Has Berkshire Hathaway been hiring?
I would say net, we probably are hiring most of the time, but not by big numbers. But Geico, for example, I'll bet our employee count goes up every month and probably has for decades. And but the railroad probably has called back some people, not a lot, but car loadings are up a fair amount this year. And just last week, I mean, they were up pretty good last week. So that does get reflected pretty fast in railroad employees. So we're up a little.
Just today, the Senate passed the budget resolution that'll fund the government through September. And at least it shows you that some things are moving in Washington. What do you think about it?
Well, they not only did that, but the House passed a new health care bill. So, yeah, I would say this: if they hadn't passed a budget, that would be news. But that whole thing it's archaic. I mean, they ought to figure out a better system, both in terms of the debt limit and going through these theatrics. It's kind of unbecoming almost. I mean, the country's been around a long time, and we should have gotten so we don't have to go through this all the time.
Is it something that you pay much attention to as a business leader when watching these things? And we have gotten kind of accustomed to the theatrics, as you put it.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, anytime a debt limit comes up, I'm not sitting there thinking, is the United States going to default on debt or anything of the sort. I think 99% of people in business feel that way.
One of your new holdings, Apple, one of your big holdings, just came out with its earnings this week, and the initial reaction from Wall Street was to sell off the stock a little bit because of disappointing numbers of iPhone sales. Is it safe to assume that you still don't own an iPhone?
That's safe to assume. Yeah, you can put that one in. You don't have to ask me that again for another 5 years. I've got a very, very effective flip phone, although I don't have it on me.
What did you think of Apple's earnings?
Well, it's about what I expect, but I don't own it because of what I think the earnings are going to be in the next 3 months or 6 months. It's very hard to figure out how much people delayed their buying of iPhones because of the launch of a new one in 6 months. I've talked to our guys at the Furniture Mart, and they say there's a lot of that. But
a lot of people waiting.
A lot of people wait. Yeah. I mean, if you knew a new car was coming out tomorrow, a new model of something or other, and you had to pay the same, roughly the same, I don't know whether they're going to sell the new one, but close to the same for the last year model, you're probably going to wait. I mean, so I think it's an incredible consumer product.
They also have a cash hoard of over $250 billion. Are
Right.
you jealous?
I'm very jealous. Yeah, I thought I was doing okay until I look at their balance sheet. On the other hand, we've got our share of the United States.
What would you like to see Apple do with that cash hoard?
I love the fact they repurchase shares. Now what they're doing now is borrowing money in the United States, figuring they'll get that money back at some point or another. And so they're really buying in their stock using borrowed money, but with the knowledge that if they had to, they could take it back now and pay a big repatriation tax. But they probably hope that that tax comes down. And my guess is that at some point or other, that money will end up back in the United States, or most of it. And I like buying it. If I like buying the stock myself, I like the company buying it. I obviously think that that it's a good buy, and if you can buy your own stock, there's no company you should understand better than your own company. And I think buying in stock makes a lot of sense at one price, and I think it does not make sense at another price. I think it should be price sensitive. Most companies don't look at it that way, but that's the way I look at it.
That's one of the reasons that you've liked shares of IBM so much, that they bought in so much of their stock. They came out with earnings that disappointed the street, though.
Yeah.
Did it disappoint you?
Well, no, I wouldn't say the specific earnings disappointed me, but I would say that I don't value IBM the same way that I did 6 years ago when I started buying it. I mean, overall, I think the 6 years that I've revalued it somewhat downward. And matter of fact, when I got up over at 180, we actually sold a reasonable amount of stock.
You sold a reasonable amount of IBM?
Right.
Last that I had seen, you owned something like $13 or $14 billion worth of IBM. How
Well, it depends on the price.
how much? I'm trying to think back the number of shares. It was
We owned about 81 million shares.
Okay.
Yeah, and when it got over 180, compared
$180 a share.
Yeah, 180, and compared to the valuation then that I thought was appropriate and other things, we started selling some stock, and some of that was sold in the first quarter. Most of it was sold in the first quarter. Some was sold in the second quarter.
How much did you sell?
We sold about 30%.
30% of the shares? You owned about 9% of the shares outstanding of IBM.
Well, if you look at it this way, we had 81 million shares. Yeah. So we probably sold in the area of 24, 25 million shares. But a good bit of that was at higher price than most.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were selling at $180. That stock has come down pretty significantly since the earnings.
Yeah.
I think it's closer to $160 a share.
Yeah.
Would you still sell? What?
I don't think we'll be selling.
Why are you?
In fact, we could buy it. I mean, I continuously look at what they do. I look at the price of the stock when it was over 180, and I looked at what was happening and everything. They've run into some very tough competition.
Warren, why are you telling us this?
Well, because the 13F is coming out in a week, and we're going to have the annual meeting, and if questions that came up about IBM, I would feel like I shouldn't get cute in terms of having it a week later. People look back and say, well, what was he saying at the meeting?
Right. So have you talked to IBM about this at all?
Ginny Rometty was out a few weeks ago, and actually they had some stock watch. I don't know whether your viewers are probably familiar with it, but there are some stock watch firms. I don't even know their names. I don't know how many there are, but a lot of big companies use them. Berkshire does not use them, and they report to management who they think is buying and selling. In fact, I don't think I've ever even read a story on them or anything. I think it'd be very interesting just to know who they are, how much they charge, how they get their information, because we've had that happen 4 or 5 times that a management will say they kind of wonder, they're sort of hearing or something of the sort that we might be buying or selling. And like I say, I don't know quite how they get the information,
but Ginny Rometty asked you about that?
Well, she wondered whether it was true because they'd gotten reports, or she'd gotten reports, and I said it was true. I didn't tell her how many shares or any of the rationale or the prices or anything like that. But she said that this whatever firm does that had I guess informed them that they thought we were selling, and I said, well, we were, or I had been, maybe.
Can you tell us again why you sold the shares, though? Because $180 doesn't seem like it's a ridiculously expensive price, considering where you started buying the stock and where you've held it.
Well, where you buy it doesn't make any difference. Stock doesn't know what you paid for it. I mean, we own stocks that have...
But you didn't buy the stock 5 or 6 years ago assuming that you were going to start selling it if it had $180.
That's correct. In fact, we paid more than $180 for some shares. And especially this year, but always, we use specific purchases against which to match sales. So we always look for the high-cost shares to sell. Now, that's accentuated this year because we're a 35% taxpayer on capital gains. I don't think the rate's going to go up next year. It could conceivably go down. So $1 of losses is 65 cents to us this year. Well, I mean, we in effect get a 35% deduction. That doesn't mean I'm looking for them. But next year may be lower. So I am particularly interested this year in deferring gains, and maybe if I have something to sell that has a loss in it, I'll pick that. So we picked all the high-cost stock.
But what's changed at IBM that made you change your idea of whether it was expensive or cheap?
Well, it hasn't done what 5 or 6 years ago I expected would happen, or what the management expected would happen. I mean, if you look back to what they were projecting and how they thought the business would develop, and I would say what they've run into is some pretty tough competitors. And what's really fascinating is that, Amazon, which I've never seen a guy succeed in 2 businesses almost simultaneously that are really quite divergent in terms of customers and all the operations.
You're talking about Amazon's shopping business and Amazon's web
cloud
services.
Business, yeah. I mean, Jeff Bezos, I do think, is the most remarkable business person of our age. I've said that before to you. And to succeed in 2 different big businesses in a huge way is really, I can't think of another example like it. And he talked on Charlie Rose about 3 or 4 months ago, which was really good. He talked about how in the cloud he thought at best maybe he'd get a 2-year runway, and he got a 7-year runway. So he's a tough competitor. So you have some very smart people competing in that field.
When you talk about them not doing exactly what you expected them to when you looked at it 5 or 6 years ago, is that in terms of the revenue continuing to decline for 20 quarters in a row, or is that in terms of them not necessarily building up the cloud business as fast as you had expected?
Well, it's based on a lot of different types of businesses, but the earnings have been obviously disappointing. I mean, 5 or 6 years ago, I think they were earning 20+ billion pre-tax, and maybe it's 13 billion now, and I don't think the quality of earnings has improved. So it's been a period when I'm sure that it's been tougher than they thought, and it's been tougher than I thought. But I was wrong. I don't blame them. I mean, I get paid to make my own decisions, just like an Apple or something of the sort, and sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong. I think IBM is a big, strong company, but they've got big, strong competitors too.
Would you call your purchase of IBM a mistake?
Well, it was a mistake in the sense I could have done a lot better if I just bought the S&P. We made quite a bit more money than if we just sat with Treasury bills, but there were a lot of things to make money in that we missed. I missed Apple, earlier.
How much did you make on IBM?
Well, we picked the high-cost stock to sell, so we really made the dividends basically, but they've been significant, and dividends are taxed less at Berkshire by a fair amount than capital gains. So $1 of dividends is worth more to us than $1 of capital gains, or that $1 of capital losses hurts us.
You still own, I guess, north of 50 million shares of IBM if you sold a third of it. What do you plan on doing with that stock?
Well, that just depends on both the company and the price and alternative opportunities. Now, alternative opportunities are not as big a deal when you're sitting with as much cash as we are, because we are somewhere in the area of 90 billion, counting Treasury bills, as cash and cash equivalents. So under other circumstances, alternative opportunities would make a difference. In 2008 and 2009, they made a big difference. So it really is a question of what we think is developing or likely to develop in the next few years, and what the price is, and to some extent whether there's other things that I may put a lot of money into that I like better. What I'd really like to do is buy a big business. I mean, that's what we're always looking for. So I would sell a lot of stocks if necessary, to buy a really big business that I liked.
Just to qualify, though, you're not actively selling shares of IBM right now?
That's right.
Okay. Do you have anything in mind? You keep talking about buying a big business. Anything you're looking at you like right now?
No, tell me one. I need one. I hate cash. I mean, we are investing, just say it's 90 billion or something like that, and say it's not all in treasury bills, but a lot is. We are paying roughly 100 times earnings for an investment. I mean, you get 1%. We're paying 100 times earnings for something whose earnings aren't going up. Now, that is a terrible, terrible investment, but it's a holding, position until you find something else. But the very fact that interest rates are that low makes it hard for us to buy other things, because other people buy things with a lot of borrowed money, and borrowed money is so cheap. So if we're competing with equity money against slim equity plus a lot of debt, we're at a disadvantage.
Okay. Well, Warren, I want to thank you for your time. I know you're on your way out the door, but we appreciate your talking to us
Okay,
today.
I'm going down to see our managers, and they're the real heroes at Berkshire. Thanks.
Do you have plans with them for the?
Oh, well, yeah, we're going to have dinner, and then Carol Loomis is going to interview me and Charlie in front of all the managers and probably take questions from the managers. And I always enjoy that. I love our managers.
That's great. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see more of you this weekend.
Okay, that's for sure.
Thanks, Warren.
Okay, great.
Appreciate it.
Okay.